The Fuji X100VI released in February of 2024. It is February of 2025. And I finally got my hands on one. Let's talk about it. Let's jump right into it. If you're looking for this camera, you know that it is extremely hard to find. It has been since release date. I know people that have pre-ordered this on Twitter threads and they have still not gotten theirs. Some people have, some people haven't. There has been immense luck with some people and immense misfortune with others. You can't really tell how Fuji is fulfilling orders at this moment, but some people get them relatively fast, some people don't. This camera is a holy grail of cameras in the community at this moment. It is not a camera that is just easily accessible. If you want a Sony a7C II, if you want a Nikon ZF, if you want a Canon R5, you can walk into any camera store and just grab it at your heart's content. If you want a Fuji X100VI, you would be lucky to walk into a camera store and see one just sitting on the shelf. And that is how I came across this one, actually. I walked into my local camera store, it was sitting on the shelf. I said, dang, you guys have an X100VI? The owner told me, we've already fulfilled all of our orders for the X100s. It's just the last one we had left over. I said, dang, that's cool. Left the store. Sat on it. I was like, you know what? I need some more filters for a job I have coming up. I'm gonna go back to the store. If it's still there, I'm gonna grab it. Why not? Went back like 3 or 4 days later. The same X100 was still sitting there. So I grabbed it. I said, why not? I'll grab it. Let's do a video on it. Let's talk about it. Because unlike the mass majority of photographers right now, I don't necessarily, I don't want to say want this camera or need this camera. I don't think anybody needs this camera, but I recently picked up a Leica Q2 and I just don't feel the need to have both of them. But that doesn't mean that I don't absolutely love Fuji's X100 line. I have been a loyal fan since the early days of the X100. I have had every single model except the F. I've used the F, I didn't own one, but I've owned every other model, therefore, all the way up until the V, which I recently just sold to a dear friend of mine, maybe like 6 months ago. And that's about how long I've been without having an X100. And I won't lie, I've missed it. It's a great camera. It's relatively small. It fits into an everyday bag. It's the reason why people made this camera popular. It is great. It is fantastic. But let's jump into, is it the camera that you want or that you need? I have some pros, I have some cons, I have some questions from friends that wanted me to touch on, and let's make this video not 15 minutes, if possible. This camera has become extremely popular because of social media. The weird thing is, some people will very much like this camera. A lot of people will not. It will not be for you. Do not let social media inflate or conflate your brain, your ideas, and make you feel that you are not doing enough or that you need to have this camera to do what you need to do. Don't let it happen, guys. If you want it, get it. Don't get it because social media told you to get it. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I won't go over too many specs, to be honest, because I don't really care. The X100VI is a 40 megapixel sensor, unlike the X100V, which is a 24 megapixel sensor. I don't necessarily mind the 24 megapixels. I also feel like we really conflate the megapixel count nowadays, and that's just like another tier that everyone's trying to appeal and reach. It's unnecessary, but in this situation, I actually don't mind the 40 megapixels because it allows you a lot of room to crop in. And when you're dealing with a fixed lens camera, having that ability to shoot something at a 35 millimeter equivalent and then being able to crop in and still have plenty of image to play around with, I do think that is a big plus. And it's not very much of an upgrade from the V. I'll be honest, if you have an X100V, you don't really need the 6. We don't really need the 6 period, but it's not really worth the upgrade. If you're on the F, the S, the T, this would be a major upgrade. You would get the new lens. I think the F was the old lens, the V was the new lens, and this is the same lens as the V. Obviously, it's kind of hard to tell. I just have a lens hood on here. Just take that lens hood off, and you can kind of see. This lens is super small. If I take this filter off that I have on here, It is extremely tiny. You can just put this in literally a jacket pocket. It really makes the size of this camera much, much smaller. I could low-key just throw it in. Could I throw it in this pocket? I low-key could just throw it in my jacket like that and then get out of here. I ain't even thinking about that. That's kind of crazy. I could literally be out hanging out with my friends. Can you guys see? I can be out chilling just like this, jean jacket, shirt, chilling. And then if I see a picture I like, literally reach into my pocket, pull out my X100, take a couple photos, play photographer, throw it back in my, oh, well, gotta open it up first. Throw it back in my pocket and then get out of here. I mean, obviously you have to take off the accessories to do so because this does add a little bit of size to the camera overall. But with that being said, it's not too bad. It still is pretty compact. It does add, like I said, it does add size. If you add this pack onto the camera, it adds size to it, but it is still extremely small, very maintainable, and it's a very good size camera to have with you. Obviously, in comparison to any kind of full frame camera or much larger camera like the Q2. The Q2 isn't much larger, but it has a much larger lens on it, which makes it that much harder to carry with you on an everyday basis. A lot of pros for this camera for me are going to be the ergonomics, shooting experience. It is fun. Anybody saying that this camera is not fun to shoot with is crazy. It is absolutely a fantastic camera to have with you. It has the manual dials on top, just like the other Fuji cameras. Obviously, you can pull your tab up, change your, you know what I'm saying, your ISO, push it back down. You have your exposure compensation, function button, another function button. There's another function button right here. Everything. Camera is very sleek, has a really good feel to it. It's fun to shoot. Anybody saying this camera is not fun to shoot, they're crazy. Another pro is gonna be JPEGs. The JPEGs out of this camera are fantastic. You can't say that they are not. I'm not a Fuji hype boy anymore. Quite frankly, I have a lot of issues with Fuji, but the JPEGs are great. The color science is great. The ability to just shoot a photo, upload it directly to your phone and not really have to make any tweaks to it is always going to be a plus for me, at least, when it comes to making images and just having something on the go that's not just sitting down in Lightroom, Photoshop, and actually having to edit an image. That's just not really for me. This is a great camera if that is a style that you operate with. There's a lot of pros to this camera. I don't want to get into all of them. Oh, I will get into it because most people don't know. The F is the last model, the V does. The V and the 6 have the back swivel screen that the F does not have. I wish this was a tilt screen like the X-T5. It is not. It only goes one way. It goes up and down, which is actually still pretty nice. Have a nice screen protector on there, you can see it. But I do think it's still pretty cool. It tilts all the way up to a 90-degree angle, and then you can pull it out, and then you can still shoot from low angles, which I do think is really cool. If you have to shoot from low angles, you don't have to get down on the ground. I really wish it had like a 3-way tilt like the A7R5 and the X-T5. I think that is the superior screen layout function, either or. Really quick, let's just jump into a couple cons of things that I don't like about this camera. Retail, this camera is $17.99. No, $16.99. This camera is like $16.99. It's like $17.97, $1,800 after tax if you pick it up at a store. If you have to pay with shipping, maybe $18.50, somewhere like that. I think that's kind of high. I won't lie to you. For what you get, it's a great camera, but you have to really know what you're going to get. I don't think $1,800, I don't think you really put a price on it. I don't think $1,800 is too much if it's a camera that you use every day for family moments and really fulfilling photography. I feel like $1,800 can be too much when you buy a camera and you just use it sometimes. Or if you buy a camera and just use it for social media, it can become a camera that is just, what are you paying for, right? I'm really a big guy on what am I paying for? Am I paying for something because it's popular, or am I paying for something because I'm using the heck out of it? You know what I mean? If I'm paying for using the heck out of it, my dollar is always well spent. If I'm paying for it because I really like it, I don't think it's worth it in the long run. And that's just my 2 cents. Another con for me is gonna be the UHS-1 like storage speed. I can't fathom how Fuji hasn't fixed that on this camera. It's a 2025 camera, and the SD card load speed loads at a UHS-1 storage capacity. or not capacity, but as far as speed, that's slow. I won't lie to you. Anybody using UHS-1 cards out there, you know that is very slow. I understand this is a slow camera. I don't understand why it isn't a minimum UHS-2. I don't even know if people buy cards that aren't UHS-2 anymore, unless you buy the really cheap ones from Best Buy, but it's a con. At least for me it is. My last con, maybe not last, but another con is gonna be autofocus. The autofocus is terrible on this camera. And I don't think it necessarily needs to be great, but it's bad. And I don't think you notice it if you're in the Fuji ecosystem, because I used to be fully endowed in the Fuji ecosystem. But once you switch over, and I've been shooting a lot with my FX3 and my A7R5, and I picked this thing up now. And don't get me wrong, I shoot other cameras. I'm not gonna keep comparing them. I shoot other cameras that also, the autofocus is pretty bad. But I grab this camera, I go to shoot, it hunts. It does, it hunts, it's very slow. I just like, wow. I guess I never realized it in all the other iterations because I've been shooting film for so long, so I shoot slow. So going from film to shooting one of these, it's just gonna be a slow experience. But when I go to shooting a lot of work stuff and then I jump back into shooting this, I'm just like, oh wow, I really notice how terribly slow the autofocus is. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if you shoot slow and you don't necessarily care. But if you're in a situation, just be aware, the autofocus is not the best on this camera in low light situations. In broad daylight, sure, it's fine. Inside low light situations, there's gonna be some hunting on this lens, and it just is what it is. I think my last con is gonna be, for this to feel like such a manual style, rangefinder style camera, I really wish there was a better manual focus. There is this manual focus ring on it, but the experience just isn't very fun. I wish that was the only thing that they did, like maybe, I don't know. I have no recommendations for Fuji because I just don't know how they could improve it, because it's not terrible. It's just not terribly fun to shoot this thing in manual focus. And I think that is an aspect on which people would utilize more if there was more fun in shooting manual focus on this camera. Oh, one of the pros that I left out, and probably the biggest overall pro of this camera in my opinion, and probably the only reason, one, this camera justifies the price, two, that makes this camera one of the best cameras on the market, is the OVF. This camera has an OVF in it, an optical viewfinder. It also has an electronic viewfinder, an EVF. There's no other camera on the market, brand new today, that you can buy that has an optical viewfinder in it. Outside of, like, obviously Leicas, but they're not optical viewfinders. They're rangefinders, but having an optical viewfinder in a camera is such a fun experience, and it's probably the closest thing that you can get to shooting like a rangefinder style camera. Fujifilm has discontinued every other camera that has an optical viewfinder, the X Pro series, the X100 series. My feeling or my thought on this is that maybe it's costing Fuji more money to make the OVFs than they're making profit on the cameras that actually have the OVF in them, if that makes sense. I just don't feel like it's a big money maker for them, even though I personally feel that it's a great experience from the camera. And I would beg to, how would I even say this? If you have one of these and you use the optical viewfinder, leave a comment below. But I'm curious if people buy these and never even use the optical viewfinder. I asked a friend of mine if he used it, and he didn't even know what I was talking about. And I was kind of like, what? That is probably one of the main drawing features, for me at least, is the ability to look directly through the viewfinder and not through the lens. So you're not distorted with film simulations or the scene. You're just looking at the scene directly. For anybody that doesn't know what I'm talking about, I'll see if I can show you here. So mine is set up right now. Can I show you? You're not gonna be able to see it. You can see me, but not really enough in here. And that's not very good. Sorry about that, guys. But anyway, when you're looking through this from an optical viewfinder standpoint, you're looking at me through the camera here. And this is showing you that there's just me. Now, if I switch this, see how that switched to the actual EVF? And now you're seeing me with what it would look like. That looks like crap. But that's what it would look like if there was a simulation on it. And that's what it looks like when there's no simulation. You're just looking directly through an open viewfinder, which is absolutely crazy. But do you guys see that little window right there? That little window in the viewfinder is going to be the, how do I say this? The EVF preview. There's a small window that pops up for the EVF preview when you're doing the camera. So when you switch back and forth, you can make that window go away, right? If you guys can see, when I get close, see how my EVF goes away because I'm looking through the EVF now? Now if I move that, there we go guys. And then if I switch back, you'll see how it goes. And my optical viewfinder is now enabled. And now my EVF is now enabled. And then if I switch back, that tiny little screen at the bottom gives me a preview of my EVF. So basically explaining, I'm looking through the optical viewfinder. There's a small little rectangle in the bottom right corner that gives me a preview of what the scene actually looks like for exposure purposes and film simulation purposes without shooting a shot and just completely not understanding what I'm shooting. God, I just rambled. I'm sorry for that. Hopefully you guys could understand it. Hopefully that made some sense. If not, I graciously apologize for that boredom, but that is such a cool feature for me and one of my favorites in using this camera, and that alone justifies the $16.99, $17.52, whatever the heck this camera costs. That makes it worthwhile to me overall. Okay, lastly, I'm going to answer a few questions from some friends that they left me and wanted me to touch on this video before I got out of here. So let's do it. First question says, is it worth getting the V over the 6, the 40 megapixel versus 24? Really quick, without beating a dead horse, I kind of touched on it earlier in the video. 40 megapixels, great. It's a lot. 24 megapixels, great. Perfect amount. It really depends on availability and what your budget is. The V right now is not really selling for cheap. It's kind of decently priced, which is around like, I think I've seen them for like 14. If you can find a 6, just pick up the 6. 40 megapixels, being able to crop in, ultimately over time is going to be better and it's going to be newer and you're not going to have to pay some scalper's price for a V. Don't do it, just get the 6. Next question, my boy Osa, why is it such a polarizing device? People either love it or they hate it. That's a very true statement. I feel like people either love it because they're diehard Fuji fans or they hate it because they come from a previous camera system and they jump into it and they don't understand it or they don't find the value. I feel like no one likes to spend money on something and they don't find the value in it. That's a really big bummer for anybody. Imagine going out and buying a $10,000 Leica M10 monochrome and then you don't like the images or you don't like the camera. You're gonna hate on it because you can't find the value in it. Some people spend $40 on a, Olympus Mute. Okay, they're not 40, I wish they were, but you know what I mean? And they find the value. If you find value in something, you can justify it. If you don't find the value, you can't justify it. I think this has been a very hard divide on either you like the X100 or you don't. There's a use case for it or there's not. People have it because it's cool. Pick your poison, really, man. Lastly is it an ideal dad cam? This is my favorite question, and I do think so. I feel like this camera is perfect for dads because I am a dad myself. It is great to have this camera with you. You're out and about, you're shooting, you're taking photos, and you're not really removing yourself from the environment. If you shoot film, like I know you do, bro, or like I do, there's not really a lot of small point and shoot cameras that you don't have to pay a premium for, and it's hard to just really just capture those moments on film. You can, but you forget about them, you come back and develop them later, that's cool. But every now and then, outside of using your phone, it's nice to have a camera that you're at the park, you're at the mall, you're at Disneyland, you're at Target, and you grab a couple photos of your fam, and then you're just chilling. I feel like this is a great camera for that. I will say, you have to like this ecosystem because then again, it's a premium for one of these. You can get a Ricoh GR camera for $800 cheaper, and it's gonna be even more of a dad cam because it's even smaller and it's much more convenient when it comes to taking photos of the kids. So it really just depends on use case scenario and the person behind the camera itself. But if you can appreciate all of the quirks and all of the little functions of this camera, I think it can be a fantastic dad cam and just an overall fantastic cam for anybody that wants to just have a small camera that they can carry with them relatively everywhere and just grab some photos that are gonna be much better than using your phone. That being said, I got nothing else. If I left something out, I'm sorry. If I didn't show enough photos, I'm sorry. People always talk a lot of trash. I watched an 8-minute video and he only showed 6 photos or something. Hey bro, I'm sorry dude. My channel must not be for you or something. But everybody that is here that doesn't complain, they don't leave me really rude comments and tell me, user error and whatever. I appreciate you all. Like always, do me a favor, hit that like button, leave a comment. Do you have an X100VI? Do you want an X100VI? Do you have an X100 at all? Do you not want to upgrade? Are you thinking about getting one? If you came across one? Whatever the case may be, I appreciate you guys like always. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you guys next video.